Hi, I'm Josh McGrath.
I'm Andrew Haas.
And this is the Art and Pursuit Podcast. Over the last two episodes, we've dug into some of the personal reasons that contribute to the growing singleness among men. But today, we're zooming out because it's not just about personal choices or brokenness. There's a cultural current working against healthy relationships. In today's episode, we're going to explore how a cultural obsession with self, fear of risk, and the erosion of good faith assumptions have made it harder than ever for men and women to confidently step into relationships. Now, if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the show. You can watch us on YouTube or listen to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And most importantly, share it with others because changing dating culture starts with changing the conversation. So Andrew, this is the third and final part where we're discussing why men are remaining single. And I would say today is one of the most important aspects of what contributes to a lack of romantic relationships in today's culture.
And we'll start by talking about this low trust culture that we generally find ourselves in today. That's been in large part driven by self-centeredness. There's been this continual move toward individualization, what we like, what we prefer, what suits us. And that's really that's allowed us to live lives that are more inward focused. And over time, that just develops into something where I'm pursuing things in life that generally fulfill me.
A lot of today's messages that we are inundated with, whether they're on social media, movies, TV shows, magazines, following celebrities, influencers, it's really about do what makes you happy. You need to pursue the thing that makes you the happiest, even at the expense of others. And now we live in a very dysfunctional age where people are, cutting off their family and their friends. Our culture loves to use the term, toxic, people. My mom is toxic, so I cut her off. My family's toxic, so I cut them off. And what we have is this, like you mentioned, a growing isolation of people living for self, wanting to only be with people that make them happy and only do things that make them happy. And as a result, we have a society that is largely unhappy.
And problems quickly arise when we treat a relationship as something to bring me more happiness. We might start working out, or we might take on a new hobby. We do these things, because we find some fulfillment there. Oh, I'm going to be better off. I'm going to be happier if I go to the gym. I'm going to be better off. I'm going to be happier if I'm dating somebody, if I'm pursuing somebody. And it just becomes this avenue by which I can become more fulfilled, but that clearly breaks down because you're just at that point assuming the other person is going to take on a role where they are just there to fulfill what you want.
And what this results in is a lack of cooperation with others. Relationships have friction, they have tension. That's the reality, whether it's a work relationship, a friendship, or a romantic one with families, even strangers, right? There are moments that as we live life, we butt up against each other. We have differences of opinions. We have strong passions. And part of the human experience is learning to work through those and to cooperate with one another in order to have a functioning society, in order to have a functioning workplace, a functioning family, marriage, church, whatever. But if your priority is simply your happiness at the expense of others, you're unwilling to cooperate. And every romantic relationship demands cooperation from both parties. There's compromise that happens often in relationships, but that compromise comes out of cooperation, of a willingness to work with one another. And sadly, so many people today are just unwilling to work with the other person. It's like as soon as they do something wrong or they do something that annoys me or something that I don't like, it's like, nope, cut them off. I don't need them. And so we live in a culture where romantic relationships have the longevity of a fruit fly, that they're constantly turning over because no one is willing to actually work with one another for something of purpose, like marriage and covenant.
And something else that really gets to the heart of the problem here is that men in particular have a reduced sense of responsibility, duty, and even expectation. We want to get away from or get out from underneath any sort of expectation that might be placed on us from, it could be from family, it could be our social circle, it could be the community at large. Men thrive when they lean into duty, when they lean into responsibility. When a man takes on more responsibility, men in general flourish and thrive with that.
Sure.
It can be uncomfortable. It can be, restraining. It can be restrictive. But through that, men often find themselves in a better place. And unfortunately, though, too many of us have decided, I don't want to take on responsibility. Duty has become a dirty word. And men categorically have just avoided these things.
And one of the consequences of that is we end up with more transactional dating environments than we do relational dating environments, where it very much becomes about what can I get from you and what am I willing to give for what I want to get. And sadly, that's not leading to fulfillment. That's not leading to happiness. That's not leading to contentment. It's leading to a broken, emotionally drained, emotionally strained, a mentally exhausted culture that largely is giving up on the idea of relationships altogether because it just isn't worth it for them.
And I'll just briefly mention the growing challenge that even the political divide now has among young men and young women. It's been shown now that young men are becoming more conservative, young women are becoming more liberal, and that is just making things that much more challenging because if you're going to be open and honest with somebody, if you're trying to build trust, if you're trying to lean into vulnerability, having political differences is a very big bridge to cross. And so men, not to say it can't happen,
Sure.
But it needs to be something that men just remain aware of and process well.
One of the big problems about a low trust culture is that it really affects how we engage personally with people that we know, whether friends, family, or coworkers. And for a lot of people, they probably don't tend to think about the trust that they exercise. But the reality is we all exercise a high amount of trust in a lot of what I'll call abstract things or institutions. So, when you're driving down the road, you trust that the driver coming at you at 60 miles an hour isn't going to swerve and hit you. When you board a plane, you trust that the pilots and the airline, industrial complex is going to get you safely from point A to point B. If you go to a university, you trust that the professors and the institution is going to give you a good education and that you're going to graduate with a degree that will help you pursue your ambitions. And so we tend to trust abstract things because we don't have a personal relationship with them. And it's easy to trust those things. But when it comes to personal relationships, where we begin to know somebody, where we begin to live life with them, where we become vulnerable with them, suddenly it's like the bar for trust is so much higher. There's zero bar set for the guy passing me on the road in his car. You and I like to run. We run roads often. And it's not uncommon that we're passed by cars as we're running. And we just trust that this stranger in this random car isn't going to hit us. I don't know the quality of that car. I don't know if that car is about to fall apart. I don't know if the wheel's about to pop off and it's going to swerve into me. I don't know if the driver's about to fall asleep or has been drinking or doing drugs. I know nothing. The bar of trust there is basically non-existent. But put me in a situation where, I'm trying to have trust with a friend or a family member, a coworker, a church leader. And the bar of trust that we set becomes so high. And because we live in a low trust culture, sadly, what that translates to is very broken, dysfunctional relationships with people because we enter into those relationships just having low trust in everybody and setting a bar of expectation with regards to trust at such a high level that should they do anything remotely that questions that trust, we're out. We're ready to cut them off completely.
And this continual move toward a low trust culture really factors into this tendency that a lot of us have, men in particular, toward taking things in the least charitable way. Too often, we will take someone's actions, their words, their conduct in a way that's either critical or suspect or just questioning their motives. And we're losing this ability to show charity towards someone else, to take something in a neutral or even positive way. Too often, something is either negative or very negative.
And this really impacts the dating scene today, because if you've got two people going out on a date and neither of them are viewing each other's actions or words in a charitable way, you're viewing it in the least charitable way, how is that relationship going to ever take off? Because suddenly you're like, well, he didn't offer to pay for my coffee, so he clearly hates me. Or she ordered the expensive steak for dinner, she's just a gold digger. He didn't open the door for me, he knows nothing about chivalry. Or, she didn't say thank you, she has no manners. He talked about, his games at home and how much he loves gaming. He's clearly a mama's boy and doesn't have a job. I mean,
right.
All of these are, kind of hyperbolic examples, but it happens. And the reason I know it happens is because I hear about it from other people, and it's all over the internet. It's people going on a first date and then jumping onto TikTok or Instagram and making videos about how terrible this other person is. And what's obvious there is they're viewing that person, they're viewing that experience in the least charitable way possible.
Men need to reverse course almost and move toward, much like, starting to take things in a more charitable fashion. Men should purpose to walk forward with good faith assumptions. Take things to the best they can, take things in a positive way. Look at situations, look at interactions, look at the environments they're in with good faith intent and purpose to interact with their own conduct, with their own behavior. Have a good faith effort toward making that situation better and that environment better off.
There's a great quote that I know Ben Shapiro uses and others use it as well. It goes, don't attribute to malice what can be attributed to stupidity.
So true.
And that's actually a good faith perspective on perhaps bad behavior. And when it comes to relationships and dating, if men don't view women that they're pursuing romantically with a good faith lens, it's going to be really hard to build a sustainable, healthy relationship, because you're going to view each action, no matter how negative it is, in the most uncharitable, most not good faith way. And that will really impact your ability to build a relationship that has longevity, to build a relationship that has value, to build a relationship that has purpose to it. And that's one of the things we're seeing today. We're seeing people who cannot maintain any type of relationship because they have such bad faith with regards to what the other person's intentions, motives, beliefs, views, etc. are.
And that's actually confirmed recently with a 2021 Pew study that found 63% of Americans believe trust in others have declined, with younger men reporting higher distrust in interpersonal settings.
And people are asking, why are men remaining single? Well, this is a big factor. When you live in a low trust society where people are not charitable, where good faith is not, assumed about you, it's going to lead to, risk aversion. Men are going to try to avoid putting themselves in a place where they feel like, yeah, there's a huge risk in me trying to romantically pursue a woman. The reward of it doesn't outweigh the risk that I see if I try to pursue her. And that results in just an increased number of men remaining single year after year.
Yes, risk aversion is a huge problem in culture today, primarily led by men. We have this tendency, we have this desire to reduce risk in our lives, to really reduce risk in all areas, even in relationships. But, building friendships, leaning into uncertainty, these all are going to require varying amounts of risk, sometimes a lot.
Yeah.
And as men, we really need to be ready, able, and willing to take on risk, however small, however large.
But men have to take on risk in a wise manner because we live in a society today where the risk really has gone up for men, particularly when it comes to interacting with women. The other day, I was actually pulling out of the studio here, and there was a woman across the road, looked like probably mid-20s, and she was changing the tire on her car. It was just her there. And I thought, I should go help her. And I thought, well, I don't want to come across as a creep. And she's there in a parking lot alone. It's me. It's daylight. But I was like, the risk of showing up and creeping her out, I was like,
it's there.
It's there. So I was like, she's in town. If she really needs help, she can call for help. I'm not going to stop. And I drove away. And I was thinking the whole time, I wish I could stop. And sure, you could say, Josh, just stop. Just ask if she needs help. And I'm like, yes, I can. But I'm also very aware that in today's culture, that if a gentleman or a man, not all men are gentlemen, sadly, but I am a gentleman. And so if you're showing up to help a woman, depending upon the situation, depending on how many other people are around, that actually might put her in a position where she feels really uncomfortable and where she just maybe from her own experience or just the cultural, temperature of today may feel unsafe. I think about this all the time when running. One of the things I hate the most about running is when I end up on a road or a path and there's a woman there alone. I'm like, man, this is just so inconvenient. On the road, I'll switch sides of the road well before I get to her and run past her and then switch back when I'm well in front of her. When I'm on a path, sometimes I think maybe I just turn around here, to avoid her. If not, I make sure that well before, we engage each other, I'm smiling, I'm waving, I'll try to run off the path into the grass. And it's okay, Josh, are you being overly sensitive? And I'm like, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. We live in a post-Me Too world. We live in a day and age where all it takes for a man's life to be ruined is for a woman to make an accusation. We live in a day and age where people say, believe all women. We live in a day and age where men's lives and reputations have been ruined online simply because a woman made a video about them. And so men have to assess the risk. And this is why it's so important to have authority and accountability in your life. This is why it's so important to follow a lot of what we've talked about over the last 50 some odd episodes. Because in order to set yourself up for success, it's not about avoiding women and saying, all women are a risk. Well, no, that's unhealthy perspective to have. But it's to recognize there's a way to conduct yourself with women. There's a way to pursue women that honor them, that help them feel safe, that still has risk for you, but you're mitigating the risk, and it's risk that's worth taking.
Yes, we definitely live in a day and age now where men categorically have created a big problem for the rest of us men who are, trying to do the right thing. And even to your example, we can be well served. We are well served by even going the extra mile. You mentioned running on the other side of the road and all this. Some might think it's extreme, but if there's an increased chance of putting her at ease or making her, less nervous, by all means.
Yeah.
Men should carry this posture with them. I can take extra steps. I can do something that I might not normally do. And yeah, who cares if it's seen as extreme or unnecessary?
Sure.
I think to help, correct this road that we're on, to get us back onto where we should be, men, we really do need to take on this mindset of, am I conducting myself in a way that is helpful, that is beneficial, that's going to make her be more at ease?
And that's something that we could talk about for quite a while. And in fact, we will in our next episode, where we're going to, talk about the importance of reducing risk in your life as a man, but how to still take risk within those specific environments. Now, something that I do want to touch on here is the fact that our culture, by and large, has yet to recognize the consequences of beliefs and behaviors that have occurred over the last 20 plus years. When you begin to see a consequence, it's easy to lay blame on the consequence rather than understanding how the consequence came about. So 63% of men being single, under the age of 35, not pursuing romantic relationships, not getting married, people will look at that and say, that's the problem, men are the problem, they should fix that. But what culture doesn't do, what most people, humans, we don't tend to do well, is examine, well, what led to that consequence? What were the reasons that so many men are remaining single? So when we don't understand the impact of a low trust society, or the impact of a society that's not charitable, or the impact of a society that does not have good faith, it's hard to understand why we are where we are today. At which point it becomes much harder to provide a solution that will actually change the course of this trajectory, which is an increase of men remaining single, which means a decrease of marriages, which means a decrease of the population, which means a decrease of our culture and society as a whole. And so one of the things that I love that we get to do here is to examine what are the reasons that are leading to this? Because if we don't examine those, we're never going to know how to right the ship.
Yes, that's true. If we don't have a good understanding of how we got here, we will have a much harder time figuring out what we can do from here to get back on course.
And so many men today view relationships with, increased skepticism, with negativity. They try to avoid it altogether. They're apathetic about it. And so we've got a problem of men who very much, whether it's personal problems, we talked about that in the first, part 1, part 2, or because of cultural influences, are refraining from the pursuit of romantic relationships. And so we need men who are willing to recognize their problems and work on them, recognize the cultural issues and persist through them in order to pursue women, in order to pursue a romantic relationship, in order to lead into covenant and marriage.
Men need to recognize that actually we are the solution to a lot of these problems. Men need to lean into risk. They need to lean into uncertainty. We need to start viewing relationships, dating, marriage as, yeah, there are unknowns, there's uncertainty, there's always what ifs, but men have a big role in pursuing these things with good faith effort, with good intent, and you never know the outcome, and that's life.
Yep.
That's how it should be. But men need to recognize that actually we are the main thing that can get this back on track.
Yeah, it's incumbent upon men to take responsibility to navigate the complexities in a way that brings clarity. So gentlemen, here's the bottom line. The culture we live in isn't helping you become a better man. It's urging you to be selfish, negative, and risk-averse to the point where, for many men, you're just totally paralyzed. Don't play by culture's rules. It's easy to blame the world for why things are hard, but that's not what men are called to do. Instead, take ownership, not of everything, but of your response to those things. Don't let disillusionment with culture or modern dating paralyze you. Take intentional, healthy steps towards marriage despite the cultural climate. You may not be able to fix culture. You may not be able to force trust in others. You can build character, develop clarity, and offer charity in your romantic pursuits, though. Take the risk, build trust, be wise, and be the kind of man a healthy woman will say yes to. As always, we love having you here on the Ardent Pursuit podcast and look forward to having you here next time.